I guess looking at your career so far, you have that first year at Utah Valley where it's cut short due to COVID, and then you have your second season, you get the Fresno State job, so it's kind of hard to it's difficult to judge where you were at with that program. Going into a potential year three, and then at Fresno State, you have 2 years sub 500, and then you have 2 years above 500. What are kind of like the steps or the benchmarks that you're looking for when you're building a program?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Well, I think one of the things about going back to Utah Valley is that's a school you're not supposed to be able to win there. I didn't agree with that. That's why I took the job. And in fact, we went out there and beat a lot of Mountain West schools, and I think that turned heads because you're not supposed to beat Mountain West schools at Utah Valley, but we did. And then obviously we walked into nothing short of a dumpster fire at Fresno, and it took a minute to refill with talent, but once we did that, we got the thing rolling, and obviously the trajectory was clear. I think we won 19 in year one, 23 in year two, 33 in year three, and 37 in year four. So, we got the pieces in place and went to work. And in my head, obviously, I'd like it to be faster than 3 years to get to 33 wins, but that's just what it was. And so we will take that same approach. Obviously, I want it to be faster, but we'll bring that same approach to Iowa. We'll do the things that we outperformed our ability. We outperformed our ability everywhere we've ever been, and so that's what we plan to do here.
What are kind of some of the characteristics that you hope your program at Iowa has, and what are some of the characteristics that your previous programs have had?
Well, we're going to pitch and defend. First of all, I think every championship caliber team is going to pitch and defend. We're going to be super competitive. We're going to be super gritty. We're going to be really, really tough outs. We tell the girls, listen, there's being a tough out, right? Being a tough competitor, it doesn't have anything to do with your batting average because I've faced 240 hitters that are tough outs, and I've faced 390 hitters that are not tough outs. It has everything to do with the way you approach it, the way you compete, the way you grind. And so we want to instill that into each and every one of our athletes, and we want to instill that into our culture. We're always going to be able to pitch and defend, but we're always going to be able to compete. We're always going to be able to grind, and I alluded to this earlier of, I don't care if, we're the best team in the country, the worst team in the country. We want to outperform our ability, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. And that's how we do it.
How is the new landscape of college athletics? Because you became a head coach in the post-transfer portal era. It's always been a thing since you were a head coach, but NIL was new, I think, your second year, and we saw how that impacted college softball this last season. But what does the new landscape with revenue sharing, NIL, transfer portal, all of that affect how you want to build your roster slash recruit prep players?
Well, that's a moving target at this point, I think. You know, I we all have we all have what's in front of us, right? We all have to work it within what's and so there's no point in complaining about it. It is what it is. You either accept it or you get out of this business. We accept it, and obviously we try to leverage it. We've done very well in the portal over the years, and we will continue to do well in the portal. I think at the end of the day, in this country, there is a surplus of talent. There really is. This isn't a sport where, I mean, I think pitching might be its own beast. I'll say that. But we talk position players. There's a surplus of talent. There really is. There's more athletes than what there are spots, and so it's really about finding the right ones that fit. That hasn't changed. Even through this transfer portal era, is there are coaches that can recruit. There are coaches that can figure out how to get those athletes to work together as a team, and create great atmospheres and great environments where you win. And we see it across the country where you'll have a program that that's how they got decimated by the portal. And yeah, they'll take a little dip, but they end up being just fine. The next year, the year after, they rebuild it really quickly because their processes are really, really good. And so I think that as much as the landscape has changed and there are challenges and things to work through in this environment, bottom line, good coaches are good coaches, and they'll find a way to have good teams.
And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but while we're on the topic of recruiting, you want to hit Iowa maybe a little bit harder than it's been hit in the past. I know that some complaints is that, Iowa doesn't recruit Iowa girls as much as they should. You're not from Iowa, but I guess take me through what's your perspective on recruiting the in-state talent.
Well, they all want to be Hawkeyes for one. So I think it makes no sense to go elsewhere when that athlete is here right now. And I'll say this because I think people may not understand this initially, but in this transition, there was turnover. There was roster turnover, and both ways, right? It went out and it came in. Now, when we approached the transfer portal this summer, we did not necessarily approach it regionally. We approached it because we needed to build a roster and build it fast. We went after best available, and so that didn't necessarily mean in the state of Iowa. But that was just the starting point. And so the roster may be a little heavy out of state in the first couple of years. But when we start to get into this state, recruiting them from the time they're in sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth grade and all the way up, getting them into our camps and knowing the talent, well before it steps on our campus, that's when we're going to start to see the greater percentages. I mean, Rick Heller's done a great job with baseball, recruiting heavily in state roster. We plan to do something very, very similar. Even though I will say maybe in the first couple of years we won't necessarily see the percentages that we will in say years 3, 4, and 5. But no, we're going to hit the state hard. The talent's here, the athletes are here, and we need to develop them. They're often multi-sport athletes. They're very athletic. They're not very injury prone. I think that's all a positive. But sometimes they haven't fully honed in on softball. They've been playing multiple sports, developing themselves as athletes entirely, but they may have maybe a little behind on say like glove work or something like that. So we need coaches that can develop those skills, and so that's the staff we've assembled. That's the approach we're going to take. I'll tell you right now, I'll go anywhere for pitching. I don't care. Obviously, we'd love to have Iowa kids for pitching, but if it ends up being out of state, that's fine. But position players, we want to live right here, right at home. We want to start here and then move to our surrounding states and then beyond if we need to.
You mentioned pitching a couple of times. You brought Soraya with you from Fresno State. You brought her from Utah Valley originally. I guess what about her makes someone that you've wanted to bring with you when you've had the opportunity to do so at both of your, I guess with both times you've changed your job?
Yeah, just so she's always had tremendous ability. She needed a good environment and a good coach to get it out of her to refine her mechanics and get her to where she could be elite because her stuff has always been very, very good. But I think the other thing about Soraya is she wants the ball. She's a competitor. She wants it in the big moment. She's not afraid. She goes out there and competes and she throws her pitches with high intent. She believes that every time the ball leaves her hands, she believes she's going to be successful. She thinks she's going to strike everybody out, and that's what you want, because there's a lot of pitchers that have some ability, but I mean, she's a killer. She's a cold-blooded killer, and you'd never know it by talking to her because she's just the nicest human you've ever met. But I'll tell you what, she is there to strike everybody out.
And then I believe you got a full 25 player roster now. How confident in that group are you, and what was the process of putting that together? You click on the roster, and I think half the players don't have numbers because they're new to the team this year. So what was the process, and how confident in those 25 are you?
Well, it's like I said, one of the immediate tasks of this position was to backfill in the transfer portal, and so it was best available and check some boxes, make sure that we have some defense up the middle, and try to add a little bit of speed. And so yeah, we definitely went best available in the portal. And did very well in the portal. I've had a lot of coaches come up to me out recruiting like, hey, you guys did great in the portal. Yeah, we did. We did a good job this year. And so obviously that'll help the transition go smoother. But no, I think that was just the first month. We have some wonderful athletes returning. Got a great new hitting coach in France Strube from Boise, but originally from Iowa City. And we feel like she's going to do a great job training them, preparing them. And, the goal isn't necessarily that any one individual athlete, carries the team offensively. The goal is for everybody to get better and to have an offense that can really score runs, produce runs throughout top to bottom and middle. And I think France Strube's going to be able to get that out of them. And we're excited to see what she does.
You mentioned Coach Strube. You also have Coach Alvaro, who joins you from Fresno State, and Coach McLish. Those three, what about them made them desirable candidates to bring in and fill out your coaching staff at Iowa?
Yeah, well, Bobby Alvaro, I mean, he's been a part of our system, our our pitching and our defense, which we do very well. And so we wanted to obviously bring that system here to Iowa and use the same approach that we have been having a lot of success with. And so he's familiar. There's no training there for me. It's he's plug and play. So we're excited to have him, and he's a great men's fast pitch pitcher in his own right. So obviously he knows the game and knows how to compete at a high level. So that was easy. And then Ali Miklesh has ties to Iowa City, ties to the Big Ten. She worked under Shauna Stanton at Indiana, who I think is one of the best in the game. And so, with her work ethic and with her ties to the Big Ten and to the Midwest, we felt like she was a great addition. We did want to add some Midwest personality to this staff. I think I'm honorary. I grew up out west, but I spent enough time here that I'm considered Midwest, which is good. But then, with one coach kind of being a West Coast guy, it was nice to add a little bit of Midwest flavor as well.
That Midwest ethos that you mentioned, is that something that you remember being in place at Iowa when you played for the Hawkeyes and were part of those successful programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes that's your edge. If you're playing in that regional final or whatever it is, that Big Ten championship, whatever, fill in the blank. Um, there's just something a little bit different when you're doing it for the school that you bleed for. And so the Midwest ethos is really just finding people that care more, that want it more. If we wanted a little bit more than the team on the other side, because when you get to that championship game, there's not a whole lot that's separating this one from that one. It's a very, very small margins, right? You don't see championship games typically won by 10 runs. They're close games. And so what's going to get us that extra run to win that game? Well, sometimes it's just digging a little bit deeper, finding something a little more. So we want people that really care about this place.
You mentioned, success is a process, not necessarily a 1 year thing, but you want to have success in year one. How do you balance, understanding that it is a process, but it might not be overnight, and not putting too much pressure on yourselves, the players putting too much pressure on themselves. Just take me through that balance.
Yeah, well, I think when we sit and we do an interview like this, we kind of talk about the thing holistically, but on the ground, day to day, it really is just 1% better. That's that's the approach, and that's the approach for every single athlete. And so that doesn't mean we don't have any visionary talks like at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the spring, or have goals and things that we shoot for. We do, we have all those things, but when you show up to practice every day, it's like, hey, I just want to get a little bit better at fielding. Hey, I just want to get a little bit better at hitting. That's the process. That's the reality of the process. Maybe not as flashy as what people would like, because they're always looking at the results and those things. But when we get in there day to day, let's focus on controlling what we can control, getting better at what we can get better at.
When you were considering taking the Iowa job, did you ask Coach Blevins for any advice? Or since you've accepted the job, has Coach Blevins given you any advice?
Yeah, we've talked a fair amount both before and after. Well, she's obviously just a huge advocate for the program, and she's been tremendously helpful. She's connected me with a lot of people throughout the state and helped us, guide us a little bit in some of the recruiting decisions, which has been great. And before, yeah, we talked at length. We talked at length about the job and the pros and the cons, and what needs to be done to be successful. And we actually, I believe it was about a year and a half ago, our staff at Fresno sat down and we did a Zoom call with her over the holidays, and just kind of picked her brain. And she talked a lot about her experience and the things that she thought she did well over the years, and kind of shared some of her wisdom with us. So obviously she's somebody that I'm really familiar with, but our staff and Bobby Alvara in particular, was on that call. And so it's been cool. It's been really cool to kind of reconnect with her, and to be here in Iowa City. And we know that she's going to always be in our back pocket and help grow this program.
It might not necessarily be from Coach Blevins, but is there one piece of advice or one kind of motivational motto that you've kind of carried with you through this process?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but when you talk to her, it's clear that she will just refuse to fail. She's just going to find a way to win, no matter what the circumstances are, or which players are on the roster, or whatever it is. And I think that's really, really key is, what happens when, you lose a vital athlete to the portal, whatever the story is. What happens when, you've lost 4 or 5 in a row. It could be any number of things. But I think that there's an attitude and there's an energy and there's a culture. We use that word, but there's a culture to winning. And sometimes you can have a winning culture even when things aren't going your way. And so that's so foundational to everything that we do is we understand that when I have a good process, say as a hitter, where my process is I'm going to go in there and I'm going to swing hard at good pitches. If I do that, it doesn't guarantee that I'm going to get a hit in this one at bat. But what it does mean is that over the course of 50 at bats or 70 at bats, things are going to play out in my favor, right? The game is so like that. Let's implement great processes, right? Let's have a awesome rock star culture, right? Let's create an environment where people want to be a part of it, where they work hard and they want to be there and they bleed for their school. We do those things. It doesn't mean we're going to win every single game. It doesn't mean that we're going to get a hit every single at bat, but we understand over the course of time that those things do lead to success.
And then in going back to recruiting, when you're selling a potential recruit on Iowa, what's the top of the list of like this is why you need to become a Hawkeye?
Yeah, that's great. Well, first of all, I'll tell you this school and this town, they sell themselves, which is great. You just get to walk them around downtown, show them the facilities, and they're just blown away. They're blown away. If they're from the Midwest, they probably had a clue. If they're not from the Midwest, they're going to walk in. They all say the exact same thing. We didn't know what to expect. We did not expect this. And so it is a tremendous place for that. It's obviously great in recruiting. But, why do they need to be a Hawkeye? They need to be a Hawkeye because they want to win. They need to be a Hawkeye because they want to be a part of a great institution. They want to be a part of a culture and a community. Everybody loves the people in the Midwest. Midwest folks are just super nice. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to have a great college experience. But I mean, they're going to come in and they're going to want to play for this staff. They're going to want to be a part of this program, and they're going to want to be a part of, the championships that are ahead of us. And I think for me, it's got to be a fit in that they have to want to work, right? They have to be grinders. If you're not a grinder, you're not going to fit here. I don't care how good you are. You need to be a grinder. You need to be competitive, right? You're going to need to want to compete for your position every single day because you will. This is not a program where you're going to come in and hit cruise control and just cruise in on talent. It's just not going to work like that. So we're certainly looking for the right fit on that side as well.
Then in terms of the coaching staff, you mentioned Coach Alvara's professional experience. You have professional experience as well. What kind of asset is that for a coaching staff to have?
Well, I think it's great. I mean, I think first of all, it's credibility, for the student athletes to know that, hey, our coaches have been there before and they've done it at a high level and they know what it takes. But yeah, I mean, it's huge. I think as an example, I think hitting and hitting good pitching are two different things. I know a lot of people that can hit front toss; they hit it great. But when you talk about hitting a high level pitcher and then talk about hitting an elite pitcher, those are different skills. And so obviously we're training a program to be able to hit elite pitching. Because we believe that championships run through elite pitching. You don't beat a bad pitcher in the championship game. You beat a good pitcher, a really good one. So, I think our playing experience really kind of helps us to understand what it means, not just to win, but to beat the best, because that's what we're gunning for.
And then talking about wanting to start the process, get 1% better every day. What are you hoping to see in fall ball out of your team?
Yeah, I think that I think they've only scratched the surface of their potential. I'll say that as individuals, I think they've only scratched the surface. I think that we are looking for, I mean, I don't know what the number is, but one, two, three, four, five of them just to completely bust out and be totally different athletes than what they were a year ago. I think that there's a lot of potential within this group for that. Um, I'm looking for a pitching staff that learns how to compete together. This is definitely going to be a pitch by committee situation for the most part. Doesn't mean that we won't have our games where we'll have a horse and just go, but by and large, we're going to pitch by committee. And so we need a pitching staff that learns how to pitch together and do their jobs well. And so building that team environment, getting some really breakout athletes. I think this would be a great year to see some of that. I think we will. And then just putting all the pieces together and fitting that puzzle as best as we can and giving ourselves a great chance to win a championship.
pitch by committee, is that somewhere you want to kind of live as a program, or would you prefer to have one or two aces that you start one on Friday, start the other on Saturday, or start one to start the doubleheader, start the other for the second game of doubleheader, go back to the game one starter for the third game?
We will pitch by committee. Again, and I don't want to back myself into a quarter because there are times where we haven't. I mean, this last year in the Mountain West tournament, that's the first and only time I've ever done it. But I threw Soraya three back-to-back games, but she was just elite. She was elite. She wasn't giving up runs, and she was tremendous. But I will say that was the first time in my career that I've done that. So, pitch by committee, and we believe strongly that if we do that, we are a better version of ourselves when everybody does their job and does it well, and we don't put too much load on one arm.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with me before I go ahead and let you go, or anything that you feel like I should have asked about that I didn't?
No, I mean, we're just obviously excited to be back in the state. We want to change the narrative. I don't know that the narrative has been something that we've wanted it to be for the last few years, but we want to change this narrative, and now is the time. Now is the time for that. And so we want to build the buzz and get people excited about this program. And we know winning a couple softball games is definitely going to help that. But everything that comes, we're ready for it. We're up for the challenge, and we are very much invested into the short term and the long term to make this program great again.